How to spot a bad plumber in 60 seconds. This video is sponsored by Leak Pro. Go check out leak-pro.com. Look, I've been in this trade for decades. I've trained plumbers, hired plumbers, and fired more than a few. If you know what to look for, you can tell a bad plumber in under a minute. Let's jump in here and I'll show you how. Well, first of all, when a plumber shows up, do you know that you can ask for their license? And depending on what state you're in, get online and check to see if they really are a licensed plumber, or maybe if they're just an apprentice that the plumbing company is sending out. Because a lot of plumbing companies do that, and really, it's not legal. Number two, no written estimate. When you got a plumber that comes in and he's talking to you and he's telling you, look, you know what? I can do this for this. Let me go ahead and get started. Well, to be honest, you should have a written estimate. Better than that, have an estimate that's prepared on an iPad where it's emailed to you. Then you have documentation that not only was it filled out by them, it was sent from them and sent to you. And make sure that they do everything that they're supposed to do in it. There's certain things in there too you want to make sure that are included, like inspections if they're required, and make sure that you ask the plumber, hey, when you install this water heater, is an inspection required? If they say no, get online, find the AHJ in your area, the authority having jurisdiction, and ask them, hey, I've got a plumber out here installing a water heater. He says a permit and an inspection is not required. Is that true? And see what they say. Number three, trash talk other plumbers. Now, I got to tell you, this is one that I really don't like. But I see a lot of plumbers that do this. They'll come out and they're like, oh yeah, that company's horrible. Well, all they're trying to do is get you to hire them instead of the other company. That's why when people used to ask me, Roger, I had somebody else give us a price. This is who it is. What do you think? If I knew they weren't a good company, I just look them in the eye and say, look, all I can tell you is I've never heard anything good about them. And I don't know what else to say. At least then they understand you're not going to talk bad. You're not going to downplay them. And you're not going to try to undercut them just by saying they don't do good work just so you can get the job. So think about that. If you've got a plumber that comes in that talks trash, or if you're one of those kind of plumbers, this is really how people see you. Another thing is an unmarked vehicle. Now in Texas, it's required that your vehicle have the name of your company on it and your RMP number, the responsible master plumber. It's normally an M number. I used to have mine on my Jeep. We had it on all the vans that we had. Matter of fact, there's a company out there that's probably still got my M number on them. I should reach out to them because that's illegal too. Unmarked vehicles or tools. If they don't have their vehicle branded, marked and all that. I remember one of the big jobs that I did one time, I got a call from a real estate agent that said, hey, you know that house that y'all came out and said there was a leak on? I said, yes. She said, well, the home seller had his plumber come out and he said there's not a leak. I said, well, he's lying to you. And she says, Roger, how do you know that? I said, well, I know my plumbers. I taught them to do leak detection the way I do it. If my plumber says there's a leak, I guarantee you there's a leak. Said, well, they want you to come back and do it again. I said, okay, here's what I'll do. I'll come do it again, but I want the other plumber there and I want him to pay for it if there's a leak. And she called the other homeowner and said, okay, we'll do that. Of course, he pulls up in an unmarked vehicle. There is a leak on the house. And he just kept trying to argue with me in the beginning. Told me, oh, you're wrong. You just don't know what you're doing. I said, how did you prove there's no leak there? He said, with a camera. I said, are you really dumb enough to believe that you can run a camera through every inch of this pipe? And if there's a crack or anything like that, you can see it with the sewer camera? He got quiet real quick. Next, just a gut feeling. I tell you what, there's some people that when you meet them, you just get that feeling. It's like, you know what? This is not going to be good. I don't know if y'all have heard it, but remember me telling the story about my garage door? I literally left the house one morning and I took out the trash. And when I go to pull my garage door down, the cable on the far side comes undone. So I'm fighting it and it won't go all the way, but I've got it down close to the bottom. So I go ahead and I go to work. Well, of course, I completely forget about it. Well, on the way home, I see a billboard and it's for like the overhead garage door company. And I'm like, oh, I'm going to call them. And I call and they didn't answer the door overhead garage door company. It just said something like blah, 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 garage door company. And I'm like, is this the overhead garage door company? And they're like, yeah. Well, I call them And I said, look, I'm headed home. I had a cable come off. I'd like to get somebody out there to look at my door today. I said, okay. He said, you know, we can get somebody there in about 30 minutes. Listen, man, that's great. I'll be home in 20. Well, I get home and I forget about it. Well, then about an hour and a half later, I get a call. And it's the guy. He says, hey, man, look, I'm calling to let you know I'm on the way. It's like, whoa, wait. You were supposed to be here over an hour ago. I'm like, okay. He said, look, I can be there in about 30 minutes. Is that okay? I said, yeah. So about 30, 45 minutes later, I'm looking at my watch. I'm like, man, where's this guy at? Finally, he shows up an hour after he said he'd be there in 30 minutes. But he shows up. And guys, I open the door. And this guy, reeks of smoke. It smells like there's an ashtray with 1,000 cigarette butts in it right here in my face. And I just kind of step back and he kind of steps forward and I put my hand up. And he says, I'm here to look at your garage door. I said, okay. I said, let me step back and we're going to cut through the office here and go out to the garage. He said, all right. I couldn't just raise the garage door, you know? And we walk in and we're walking across and I'm leading the way at that point because they kind of stepped aside in the laundry room. I opened the door, went out and they came out. And I went across the front of the garage door and I'm looking up at the cable and I said, so you see how the cable's loose right here and it came off? I said, this is the problem that I'm having. And all of a sudden here behind me, it's like, And I look back and he's literally standing right in the middle of my garage door like this. And he's looking up at the spring. And he said, you see the rust on that spring? I said, yes, sir. He said, that spring's going to break. He said, it's going to break any day now. He said, to be honest, I can't even touch your garage door. I can't raise it. I can't do anything. That spring, when it breaks, it's going to kill somebody. Now, that is the second largest spring made for residential garage doors. You've got a good one, but it's going to break. I said, wow. I said, you can tell that just by looking at it? He said, oh, yeah. I've been doing this a long time. I'm like, wow, you're good. He said, yeah. I said, well, how long does it take to get one of them in? He said, well, you're lucky. I happen to have one on my truck. I said, I'm sure you do. So I said, okay. I said, how much is it? He said, it's $800. I'm like, man. I said, okay. I said, can we look at the cable over here? He said, yeah. Gets over and looks at it. Says, you know what? Yeah, this whole thing's got to be replaced. He said, see up there where it's frayed? And I'm looking, I see no frays whatsoever. I'm like, no. He said, right up there, it's probably on the backside, right there by the roller. You can't see it. He said, but yeah, that's going to have to be replaced. I said, okay. I said, how much is that? He says, that's $300. I said, wow. I said, because when I called on the phone earlier, they told me to come out and do this was $129. He said, oh, no. What, $129 is our service fee. I said, well, they didn't say anything about a service fee. I said, I've got a cable that's off. I need to get fixed. And they said $129. I said, so how much are we talking today? He said, well, it's $800 for the spring, $300 for the cable, and the $129 service fee. So it's going to cost me $1,229. He said, yes, sir. I said, will you do me a favor? He said, yeah. I said, get out of my house. He said, excuse me? I said, sir, look, I'm in construction and I know BS when I see it. I said, so I'm going to ask you politely to leave. He said, okay. He said, but you still got to pay me the $129. I said, oh, no, I don't. I said, y'all never made me aware of that until you walked in here. And I'm asking you to leave. He said, well, I'll leave when you pay me the $129. I said, well, I'll tell you what, I'm going to walk in that house and I'm going to go grab my Glock. See, I'm in the business of serving people, not screwing people. That gut feeling, that, ooh, you know, when they first opened the door, it may be smoke that triggered it. I don't know, but it's not good. Trust your gut feeling. So if you've ever had a bad experience with a plumber or any other tradesperson, my worst is the garage door guy. Drop it in the comments and let me know, because I want to see how you thought you were done wrong. And guys, if you love this video, I've got some about scammers that you're really going to love. So check this one out. I think you'll love it.